Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl Finley, and I'm the director of the Atlanta University Center Art History and Curatorial Studies Collective. It's my great pleasure this evening, as part of our second virtual career week of the academic year, to be with you to welcome a conversation about We Are Here, Visionaries of Color Transforming the Art World. This is a roundtable with Jasmin Hernandez, Larry Ossei-Mensah, and Ayanna Evans. And I'm really excited to welcome you all today and to welcome our participants. This roundtable is a timely conversation on the revolutionary work of BIPOC art professionals, including art historians, writers, curators, and people who are all part of the art ecosystem as we know it today. We're anchoring our conversation in the really wonderful new book by Jasmin Hernandez, We Are Here, Visionaries of Color Transforming the Art World, just came out with Abrams this year. And we're going to talk about some of the different ways that we work together, how we form networks, who some of the players are, advocating for more inclusive and more accessible spaces across the entire art ecosystem. And we're also going to do this, of course, while amplifying the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color voices and visions as we think through this topic this evening. I'm going to just take a moment to introduce our panel, and then we're just going to dive into a conversation because we have a lot to talk about and not a whole lot of time to do so. So Jasmin Hernandez, welcome, Jasmin.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome. Jasmin is a Black Latinx founder and editor-in-chief of the Gallery Girls. Her writing has appeared in Harper's Bazaar, Paper, Bustle, Elle, and The Cut, ArtNet, and so many more. I'm sure that you're familiar with her writing. And she's the debut author of the We Are Here, Visionaries of Color Transforming the Art World, which is just out. You can get a copy through many BIPOC-owned bookstores. I just want to underscore that. And it's also available as a Kindle book read as well. So it's pretty accessible. You can find it in many different formats, and I highly recommend it. She is also a native New Yorker, born to Dominican parents, based in Harlem, New York City. And to follow her, you can go to Gallery Girls, that's spelled G-U-R-L-S, and you'll find out so much more. Larry Ossei-Mensah. Hi, Larry. Larry uses contemporary art as a vehicle to redefine how we see ourselves and the world around us. The Ghanaian American curator and cultural critic has organized exhibitions and programs at commercial and not-for-profit spaces around the globe, from New York to Rome, featuring artists such as Fiorelli Baez, Alliston Janae Hamilton, Brendan Fernandez, Ebony G. Patterson, Modou Dieng, Glenn Kaino, and Stanley Whitney, just to name a few. A native of the Bronx, Ossei-Mensah is also the co-founder of Art Noir, a 501c3 and global collective of culturalists who design multimodal experiences aimed to engage this generation's dynamic and diverse creative class. Welcome, Larry. All right, and last but not least, of course, is Miss Ayanna Evans. She is, and I wanted to say New York is in the house this evening.
Yes, yeah, we're here.
That's right.
We definitely out here.
Definitely. Always on the cutting edge, always with that entrepreneurial spirit. Ayanna Evans is a New York City-based artist, and she received her MFA in painting from the Tyler School of Art at Temple University, her BA in visual arts from Brown University, where she's an adjunct professor now. And in 2015, she received the Jerome Foundation's Theater and Travel Study Grant for Artistic Research Abroad. And during the summer of 16, she completed her installment of that residency titled Back in 5 Minutes, at El Museo del Barrio in New York City. The next year, she completed a 10-hour endurance-based citywide performance and 100-person performative dinner party in the Barnes Foundation Museum, free and open to the public, during the spring of 2017. And it was for a program titled A Person of the Crowd, which was a major performance art survey featuring artists such as Marina Abramovic, Tanya Bruguera, and William Pope L. in Philadelphia. So I just want to say that in terms of Ayanna's practice, she has exhibited and performed around the world, and her work has also been published widely in the New York Times and ArtNet, BOM, and Hyperallergic, and many, many other publications. So without further ado, I just want to welcome everyone and just let's begin the conversation. Is Larry kind of dropped out for a moment?
I think so. I'm not sure what.
I think so. Yeah.
So Larry is coming to us from he said Wakanda Beach in Ghana. So we'll probably be back in a second, and we just want to say thanks so much for hanging in just for a little bit, Larry. I know you're going to join us back, and we know it's also late where you are. But let's begin and just talk about the book. And Jasmin, if you can maybe bring us up to speed, how you thought about it, how you did your research, and just what you were trying to do with this really important study.
Absolutely. I just want to give thanks to AUC and to Rachel Brand and to yourself for including all three of us in this conversation. I'm so excited. Around 2018, it became very obvious to me that my artist friends and my art worker friends were driving and shifting the culture. It was Black and brown folks. I mean, we always drive the culture, but there was a zeitgeist, and there were these incremental shifts that were happening in mainstream, where you would see Derek Adams' work on an episode of Insecure, or I would see banners of his work for museum exhibits in my neighborhood. Just like the mainstream and the pop culture and these artist friends and these art worker friends there was a collision of these three forces coming together, and they were driving the culture. So I wanted to go beyond listicles. I wanted to go beyond. We were getting very comfortable with 10 Black artists to follow on Instagram or 10 Latinx artists to follow on Instagram. I wanted to go beyond that and canonize folks. Of course, We Are Here is not the only book to do that. There are books like The Supper Club. So We Are Here is in conversation with many books that came out recently. But I wanted to canonize and enshrine folks through my lens, through a non-academic lens, and celebrate and document. The documentation was absolutely necessary. That was absolutely paramount. And I wanted it to come through a Black Latinx voice. Many of the folks in the book, I know them organically. We met through social media in the 20-teens. It's a very organic digital relationship that blossomed into, IRL. And it was just time to celebrate them. I saw that need and that shift in the culture. It was absolutely paramount to just document them. And in a very non-academic, open way. In many ways, We Are Here is an extension of Gallery Girls, the website. It's at Gallery Girls in print. So that fun, accessible, frank, genuine, authentic, open voice is read throughout the pages and the passages in the interviews with all the 50 subjects.
And so could I ask another question about like the format for anyone who hasn't had a chance to pick it up? And again, I can't do enough, but just to say, go out, to your BIPOC bookstore and get your copy. But something about the format with regards to what you were envisioning in terms of a platform, but also how accessible you wanted this to be, the voices that you wanted to amplify and highlight, and sort of I think there's this like synergy, and connection between all of us today around this table, but also within the book itself.
I'm so glad that you picked up on that. There's major synchronicity happening all around. In terms of the format, it was just, we just thought interviews were the best way. So just very authentic and intimate interviews with very universal questions, very universal kind of fundamental questions, and striking one of a kind, beautiful imagery that can only be seen in the book. So pairing, these very intimate, universal interviews with this striking imagery, that was like the perfect combination. Throughout the book, it's 50 subjects, but the focus is on Black folks, Black artists and Black art workers. So, it's 50 folks, I would say 31 are Black folks, and the other subjects are non-Black POC. And out of the Black people represented, Black women are the most represented. So that was very important to me as a Black woman, to just center us. I talk about that in the introduction, and you just see it throughout the book. And someone like Ayanna, of course, she was going to be on the cover. And of course, she's the first one to kick off the book. That vibrancy and that badassery that she brings to her performance, practice, and all the other spaces in her life that she shows up in, we see that, we see that vibrancy. So the format was very accessible. It was just, these very universal questions. Everyone was asked 10 questions. 8 were identical, which are, what's your favorite color? Who's your favorite fictional character? How does social media and the internet, impact your practice? So these very universal fundamental questions, and then 2 questions that are specific for that subject. So everyone was asked 10, 8 are identical, 2 are custom, and then we chose, the editor and I, we chose the 5 strongest, and that's what ran. And there's just so much richness, in those answers. A lot of them are answering the same questions. What's your favorite color? But again, there's richness in their answers. I'm really happy that you picked up on the synergy, because there is massive synchronicity happening. A lot of us know each other. We've known each other for years in this community. The Black and Brown art world is tiny. We know each other. We've been showing up to openings to support our friends and each other for years. We've spoken on panels together. When I had my 5-year blog anniversary for Gallery Goes in 2017, Ayanna was a part of that panel. So it's an organic relationship amongst many of us in the book. So I wanted to capture that. And you see it all around.
I was just gonna say that you brought up something that I think everyone can speak to. And Larry, it's so good to see you, man. Really good to see you. Can we talk about
sorry about that.
No worries, man. Can we talk about networking?
Yes.
Because I think that's another part of all this. You said that you all have known each other for years, so it's also very much about networking. Ayanna, Larry, you want to maybe pick
I'll let
that up?
Ayanna chime in first.
It's like, I'll make her go. No, I don't mind. Networking. So to me, networking in the art world is like a tricky thing, because half of it is just friendship building. It's not even real networking. Like,
Right.
I feel like the best networking I've ever done has been at after parties, honestly. And I'm speaking for the New York art scene. I'm not gonna say that I know LA well, because I don't. But the art scene in New York is very much like, you get invited to the after party, go. Because a lot of times, I can't count how many times actually, that like the person that I had the most fun dancing with became the person that I worked with later. So networking in art, I think it's important, but it's casual. A lot of us aren't really on LinkedIn heavy. Like the people that tend more towards the business are, but I've noticed like if you're looking for a performance artist, you need to slide in a DM. So, and that's considered okay. Like I've had museums contact me on Instagram. So you have to kind of think of networking a little different, I think, for the art world, and be a little loose with it, not quite so stiff. But I do think networking takes you really far, which I was naive about at first. I did not understand. I thought that your work is good and you get a show, and it's sadly, that's just not it. I mean, we got aside all the isms, the racisms and the sexisms and all the genderisms, all the isms aside, people really are looking out for their friends. And you're not a friend if you have a network. So that is a big part of the art world, a huge part. And sometimes you toil away in your studio, you're a hard worker, you're a good person, you turned everything in on time, and you're still not getting picked because on that panel are friends, and they pick their friends. Not always, there's usually what I call a wild card, but even that, like I fought for people I didn't know when I was on a panel, but I had seen the work in person. So there's still a bit of a networking element to that too. So it's a big part of it.
Yeah, I think for me, I always try to make the distinction between networking and relationship building. I mean, what you see on this panel, we all know each other. These are relationships that have been cultivated over time. Some relationships will be closer than others, but at the end of the day, it's respect for each other's work and each other's contribution. And as Ayanna pointed out, you want to work with people that you consider friends, colleagues, folks you trust, folks who are going to bring a point of view that's going to add value, folks who are not going to fumble the ball when you give it to them,
Right.
folks who are going to be professional. You know, because I think for me, like in my practice as a curator, over time, I've actually had to attempt to do less so I can focus on like the projects that really kind of stimulate me. But within that, you know, now I have like a list of like 10 or 15 BIPOC curators that when someone calls me about curating a show and I can't do it, you know, I can go back to that list and say, okay, these are 5. And make sure that like my community, my network, my relationships, those opportunities stay within it in some shape or form. So whether it's curating a show, I get asked to write essays all the time, and it's not one of my favorite activities. And so,
Favorite activity, Larry?
my favorite activity, looking at art.
Okay.
Um,
So I
studio
think
visits, I would
studio
say is
visits.
also like it's
Yeah.
the tangible part of it, I think.
Mhm.
And I think the other part to networking is mentoring, right? And I
Yes.
think it's always important. I make the distinction that mentoring is not just an older person, bequeathing insights to a younger person. There is peer-to-peer mentoring, right? So
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
NFTs is like the big buzzword of the moment. And I've tried to read every article imaginable and still don't understand it. So finding someone who's like an expert in that, who can teach me that, and then think about, okay, is this something that I can add to the practice, or is this knowledge I should be aware of? So I think always being mindful that like we all have something to add, some type of value. And if that's something that can be taught and shared with someone, that's a way to mentor, and then a way to build a relationship and build trust. Because
Right.
ultimately that's what it's about. You
And
want to
I
work
also
with people
think,
you trust.
Larry, when you talk about mentoring and bringing this as part of who you are and your practice, it's not just about, like you said, the older person bequeathing, the pearls of wisdom on down. I think that there's also this, transgenerational mentoring that's going on right now. And that transgenerational mentoring is not just from the top down, it's from the bottom up, if you will. And I'm just talking across like the spectrum of time, if you will. And with that in mind, I also wanted to ask a question about, the collective work that, that we're doing, that you're doing, each of you in your own practices, that our students are doing to transform the art industry as we know it. And if you could maybe talk about, from your own place and your own practice, what type of work you're doing and how that is really trying to move the needle in a different direction. And if there are any examples that you can maybe cite that that would be useful for our students to kind of pick up on, and when they think about networking and sort of the power of, as you called it, relationship building, the right relationship is everything in doing this work, right?
Yeah, and I think there's ways to do it that's organic. Like I'm about to do a project with Art Basel in June for their OVR. And like, Noah and Mark, I've known these guys over 10 years. So like I consider them like real friends. It's not just like art world friends. Because also when you are collaborating with people you trust, there's a heightened sense of candor that you don't always have when it's like a boss or like a client. And like I'm at an age where just like I don't want to have to perform. It's like, I just want to bring my full self to
Exactly.
everything I do,
Exactly.
or I just don't do it. I think in terms of my work, foundationally, it's always been focused on emerging artists of color, folks who, I aim to identify practices that may not always get the first look. But now that's kind of shifted to looking towards veteran artists. So someone like a Peter Williams, who's 68 years old, we've been collaborating the last 4 or 5 years. And there are a lot of veteran artists who've either had that moment or never had that moment. So what can I do through my practice, whether it's through a show or an essay or, Clubhouse is my new kind of other favorite thing. I'm having conversations with artists in that regard. I think, the work that Art Noir has been able to accomplish in the last 8 years as a 501c3. Last year we were able to start a microgrant program for Black and Brown artists and cultural workers. So I think keeping it about community, keeping it organic, trying to do our best to make sure folks feel seen and feel supported, because it can be lonely depending on what aspect of the industry you operate in. So how do we get more of us in not only admin, positions, but decision-making positions behind the scenes. More of us, you know, in exhibitions, more of
In
us
leadership role,
writing,
right?
leadership
Yeah,
role. Yeah, so I think like
definitely,
Naomi
definitely.
at the Guggenheim, like, you know, that's huge. As someone who was part of like the acquisitions group for 5-6 years, like, you know, back in 2010, this was not something I would ever imagine at this institution. So how do we support? Also, the other thing is, how do we support each other's work? You know, and what does that look like in a way that's authentic and not a quid pro quo, but like really trying to make sure people are good, you know? And so I think one thing that, you know, a lot of the curators, BIPOC curators, we have like a couple of group chats. So just making sure folks are good just mentally, you know, just as humans, and remembering the humanity that is essential to this work as well.
I mean, especially at this time, but also, you know, just, you know, if we can think back to a time without a pandemic, you know, as well, just to make sure everyone's good. So we have about maybe 20 minutes left before we'd like to open up the floor for questions from our audience. And I just wanted to mention to anyone who's there, if you have a question, please send it to us in the Q&A function, and we'll try to get to it as we get to about the 6:45 hour in our conversation. Jasmin, Ayanna, do you want to add something about this collective work that we're doing?
Definitely. Writing for me is a big passion. It's a love-hate relationship because you have to sit in front of a chair for hours in front of my laptop and come up with the words. But I encourage young Black and Brown writers to not be intimidated by not having a graduate degree. In the introduction for the book, that's my first sentence. It's like, I have this deep passion for the art world, but I don't have a graduate degree in art and, you know, in art history or visual arts criticism. If you want to write, specifically for folks that want to write, because I can speak to that experience, find your, you know, just start your platform and start small. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you just shape it and refine it over time. You know, I didn't get this book deal in 2013, a year after founding Gallery Girls. It came 9 years later. It was blood, sweat, tears, and love. It was Thursday after Thursday, going to, you know, openings in Chelsea or on the Lower East Side or in Bushwick. It was community. It was a follow and a like, that a digital relationship following Larry, following Ayanna blossomed into like a real-time, you know, conversation and relationship. So for young Black and Brown writers, find your voice over time. Don't worry about sounding academic. Read everything. Research, read everything. Every article, you know, every article on every Black and Brown artist, you know, when my friends are being profiled, I devour everything. You know, for example, like in Harper's Bazaar, several Black women artists that went through the Studio Museum under Thelma Golden's guidance. You know, there was this gorgeous editorial on them. I consume that all the time. My friends are in it and I'm happy for them, but I consume research all the time. You know, just start your platform and start it small. Maybe start an IG-based, you know, blog first, and then eventually have your own platform. But don't be afraid to start. Just soak up all the information. Lose yourself in the research. Follow other young Black and Brown artists. Follow veteran artists. You can follow me. You can follow other well-known art writers. And just you'll find your space and you can find your voice. I would say not to be intimidated.
And that's actually really good advice, not to be intimidated. I think sometimes people don't realize that, like, if you message like me or Larry or any of us,
yes,
we'll write you back. Like,
yes,
like most people I know in art actually are pretty accessible, but they don't get approached that much. We get a lot of asks where somebody asking you for a show. We don't get a lot of students who are just asking for a little bit of advice. And usually student advice is something you can give in like quick. Like it doesn't drain you. It's not like, I don't see it as like this thing where I'm like, oh, it's such a burden. But like, honestly, I don't think students take advantage of that enough, especially with social media. People are easier to reach. And right now, people are still relatively home. Like we're not really at parties like we used to be. So
exactly,
it's easy to catch us. And like, I'll be like, sure, I'll jump on a Zoom call with you. I might just feel like looking at a new face. Like, that's cool, I'll do that. I think that sometimes we don't realize that, but I think part of like being collective and trying to really push forward like Black voices and brown voices and really trying to open doors, half of it is just you have to connect with people. And you have to be open to it when they connect with you. When someone reaches out and says, I need help. One thing I do a lot is I give my applications to other people. So like you're on the curator side, so I guess it wouldn't help you, Larry, but like, you know, like other artists that are in my genre or whatever, I'll say, you know, like I got the grant, I'll tell you what I applied with and I'll give you, you know, the application. Because if you've already won it, it's really no longer needed to be a secret information. It's not, there's no sweat off your back. You should share your application widely. Once you won something, that the organization, not only are they putting you on panels and asking you to be part of the reviewing process, they usually ask you to spread the word. When you spread the word, you should actually offer. If you want me to read over your stuff, I will. Because probably you cracked the code. And if you sat on the panel, you totally cracked the code. You know what they're looking for.
That's right.
You have to give that to each other freely. It has to be just offered up. The other thing that I do with my friends is that, and I have like a little crew of performance art friends, like y'all know them, Today, Dom, Nugent. They're not all people of color, but we're all the same mindset in terms of like collective action. So if one of us say gets invited to, excuse me, like a lunch, someone like Larry, and you're like, Larry gonna wanna eat somewhere nice. I don't have no money, but I don't wanna admit to Larry that I'm poor. So I call up one of them. I say, look, I got invited to this thing, but I don't think I can go. We will Venmo each other. I feel like we've been passing the same $70 to $100 around within my group.
Wow.
But it's offered without asking. No one has to call me and say, I need $100. That's embarrassing. But if you're talking to your friend and your friend says, you know, things are a little tight, I had to, you know, decide whether or not I get lipstick for the show or whether or not I was going to get shoes. If someone says to you, even a hint, especially in these times, a hint that they are struggling, you should be, and you can help them, you help them. You help them immediately. Don't even wait for like, your friend calls you and says their back hurts and they're laying around talking about, I don't know what to do. Send them a heating pad. Get on Amazon and send them a heating pad. It's like $25. If you can't afford to give monetary help, you should be the loudest person online for that Kickstarter. And I find people get embarrassed because they don't have money. And so they shrink back and they get quiet and they don't say, you know, they don't promote the Kickstarter because they can't give to it. They feel like a hypocrite. And I've been there before where I felt like that. I had to get over that. That doesn't help anybody. You have to shout from the loudest mountain for other people and not be afraid to talk about how much someone paid you. Because I've had situations where somebody was like, well, she offered me this. And I'm like, well, dang, they offered me half of that. Same show. If you don't talk about it. But if someone calls me and says, what did they offer you? I tell them the truth. I tell them to the penny what I got. And I tell them when I got ripped off. It's helpful.
That's super important, just like that transparency, because a lot of times, if it's your first time doing a big performance at an institution or whatever the case may be, you don't know what to ask for all the time. No. You know, and so a lot of times when artists are like, you know, hey, I have this museum show, I haven't worked at a museum, I know what to ask for. And I know what they're going to try to get around not giving you. But I think I mean, so many incredible gems that you just shared, Ayanna. I think the other thing that's important is for particularly the students, look to the, you know, virtually left and right of you. You know, where are there opportunities to collaborate? Because I always feel like, you know, particularly being in a university environment, a collegial environment, some of the best ideas are going to be birthed in this space for someone. You know, whether it's a publication or whether it's a curatorial collaboration, whatever the case may be, like make sure that you are, you know, doing your best to have a full understanding of what your classmates are interested in and seeing where there's synergy and opportunity to collaborate, even if it's something small. You know, if we're talking about like curatorial practice, where are there opportunities to co-curate things locally? I think now we've become pretty versed in digital, co-curating digital shows. You know, I'm a doer, so there's like no excuse why, you know, we can't leverage the tools that are available to us. whether they're physical or virtual. And then I think the other thing that COVID taught me, going back to like support, really thinking about what you do best. So if it's not, if it's not a monetary thing, if you're not like a super vocal thing, but you know how to write, you know how to develop social media strategy, you know how to do a press release, you know how to use SketchUp. I mean, think about what it is that you really do well that you can offer to the community as your service to each other, because that's how we're gonna grow together. Because that's the biggest misnomer, and I'm sure everybody on here can attest. Like, no one is successful by themselves.
No
Anyone
one.
who tells you that's a liar.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna take, loose relationships, people you don't know super well, but like you see them, it's all love, and they're gonna be super close. Where like, hey, like I've had friends who've had like there've been artists who've been like, hey, I got to do this show, I got no money to buy canvas, and I just Venmo them, like, okay, just give me back whenever you can, and because for me, the last thing I want an artist to worry about is like materials, like. You should be able to do your thing. And that's kind of why Art Noir started this micro grant program. Because like, for example, when Vanessa German, she had to fire her house in Pittsburgh. And to be able to like, disseminate funds towards her GoFundMe, I think was meaningful for me personally, because I've been to the space. But I think it just kind of affirms the work that we just try to do on a day-to-day basis.
So can you talk about some of the projects that you've been working on while we've been sheltering in place, and how they might affect, what we want to see when we come out of this as a different art industry, a different art ecosystem? I know, like for you, Ayanna, like we were talking earlier before we all jumped on, to the webinar about, what does it look like to do performance-based practice when we can't really see each other, we can't be in the same space? Do you take it online? Is it virtual? What does that do for your practice? Or is it something that might be more like a site-specific type of endeavor?
Well, for me, what I started thinking about, well, two things happened. First, I got sick. So I think that put a lot in perspective for me. Like if you thought you might die, you're like, oh, I'm not so worried about, is there an audience? Like those things became real small in my mind. So there's that. But then also I started thinking about it in terms of, what can you do to the camera that you could not do in real life? Rather than focusing on what you're losing, like what are you also gaining? There's certain things I can do on camera that don't read when I'm in person. Like I can go like this, like really, I love putting my eye really close to the camera. Like I love that, but it doesn't do anything in real life. No one's gonna get that close to you to enjoy that moment in an actual show. So there's things you can do, or ways you can even scare your audience. Like if I pull out a knife, everybody's like, oh, what's gonna happen with the knife? doesn't quite feel the same in person. They know they can take the knife from you, but now you're forcing them to watch you do whatever you're gonna do with that knife. And so there's like a different tension. So I kind of play in that. So there are private performances that I do, well, private meaning in my house, but public meaning that they are, in the world, everyone can see it. So it's interesting to realize that it opened up my audience, because I can get on Instagram, which I hadn't been doing much, Instagram Live, and I would just do a show. And so people would hit me up and be like, yo, I live in Denver and I've followed you forever, and I never thought I'd be able to see you. It's great I can see these shows. And I do a thing in the chat, which I'm trying not to do it today, but usually I'm not trying hard. I'm not gonna lie, I'm already like, hey girl, but like it's a party in the chat when I perform. You can't do that in person. That's not the culture of in-person performance. You're quiet, you watch. When I do that online, I'm like, y'all know the drill. Hit the chat, and it's like a little party. People pop in. Some people become friends because they've come to my stuff. They don't know each other outside of that. But so there's that little small, for me type of thing, but then there are commission things that I've been doing. So I'm gonna put a link, and y'all just watch it at your leisure. That was the last little shenanigans that I did with today. We did a variety show. So we kind of did it like a DeSouza Merrill type for the art world. So like, if you can do something like that, that's an online thing. But that's also, you get to highlight your friends, you get a paycheck. We told people what was for sale that week. Like, there's many checks that were checked off within that show. But like, I don't know if that would have happened in real life. It won't feel the same. So it's forced me to look at digital stuff and kind of branch out. I did something with Michigan University, which was amazing. I got to direct a piece that I wasn't in on their football field with their students from like the theater department. It was wild. Yeah, Larry. And they had some of the theater department kids are like, they have a specialized class in costume design. And every year they bring in an artist and you like design some sketches and then they wear the clothes. And then, you know, they made the costumes come to life. And I was asking for some wild stuff because I was like, okay, in quarantine, I made something where I tore up my blinds. So let's make a dress out of blinds. And I need white boots and big hair. And I want door knockers in it. They made it. They made the costumes. It was a tribute to Black films. They singing Tina Turner on a football field. And then they rip all the clothes off and they lay down and then they get back up and they do it all again because that's life, right? You fall down, you get back up, we persevere. That's what people of color do. And so, and I loved it on a football field where you're not normally thinking about a Black film. I was like, that's important. The cheerleaders came and they did stuff. It was really beautiful. But like, would I have done that if it had not been pandemic? No. So it opened me up to like almost different ways of working. So that for me, it's been beautiful. But the minute you start worrying about the audience that's not there right now because of you lost. You make bad work. It'll be terrible. But if you focus on all these great things you can do in other ways, it can just open you up.
And it's created a lot of obvious and new innovation, new directions, new, I think, networks, new synergies. Yep. I mean, definitely new networks, global networks, but also amazingly, beautifully close community networks as well.
Yep.
And when I think about, you know, the book, Jasmin, I wanted to maybe just go back to ask in terms of its genesis. I know you've been thinking about it for some time, but was there a way that the place we find ourselves in now, you know, being kind of sequestered in different spaces, did that open up space for you to get it done faster, or was it already kind of a done deal and done?
So timing, higher forces allowed this book to come out into the universe. The book was acquired in early 2019 and everyone was photographed in 2019. So I wrote and we photographed the 50 subjects in 2019. So it was an arduous 3 to 4 months. Folks were photographed over the course of 3 or 4 months. It was 50 people over 3 or 4 months. And, you know, all that labor happened then. So there was no way I could have shot this book in 2020, me being so intimate with people in their spaces. So timing, just higher forces allowed this book to come out into the world. And then March of 2020, you know, I came home permanently thinking I'd be just home for a few weeks. And I edited the whole book, you know, from March of 2020. So when the pandemic came, I was just in edits and all I had to do was just wake up and work on the book and work remotely. And, you know, my writing practice, you know, it has continued uninterrupted because I just have to sit in front of a laptop. So that's been a blessing in a way. I don't have to work another job. I can just get up every day and, you know, finish editing the book in 2020 and then continue other writing projects for 2021. But no, it was an amazing experience. I want to go back to synergy because you picked up on that and not too many people pick up on that. There's major synchronicity in the book. First of all, many of us are peers and we all know each other. But I also didn't want to make the book so cliquey. When I selected and curated the folks that would appear in the book, I did look to like, you know, the blue chip art world in Chelsea and major prominent Black and brown artists represented by these huge galleries, the Petzels, et cetera, the Hauser and Wirths. So I did look, or the Sean Kellys. I did look at that, but I also looked at like nightlife and street art and graffiti and ballroom. I looked at those communities too. I looked at artists that are unrepresented, just non-rostered artists. I looked at those as well. And I just worked very organically. I didn't play art with politics and I didn't want to make the group so cliquey. But there's a lot of synchronicity where, you know, Gabriel Garcia Roman, who's an artist in the book, he has a series called Queer Icons. And someone like Lola Flash is also in the book. She appears as one of his subjects in the book. or maybe we see a print by Heba Shabazz in Dia Vija's living room, and they both know each other, and they're both South Asian, artists and peers. So,
Yeah,
well, Dia is a cultural worker, and Heba is an artist.
I have a quick question. How different do you think the book would have been? Because I know fall 20 was the initial target, I believe, right?
Yes, it was. It was October 2020. Yes.
So how different do you think the book would have been if we weren't in a pandemic and you had to kind of like abide by the original deadline? Like, what did the time afford you to do that maybe you didn't think about because you were on an accelerated timeline?
That's a really good question. The book was already finalized by March of 2020. The book was finalized and it was just being edited, and it was going to come out in a few months, that October. When the pause came and when the delay came, it allowed me to make monumental changes. For example, the term BIPOC, that's been a term that's been used on high woke Twitter since maybe 2016, 2018, but we weren't using that term on a mainstream level in 2019, but it surfaced in 2020. So I was able to go in and correct some language. So that's a very good point. I was able to go in and correct some language. So the term BIPOC, the term BIWOC, POC, WOC, and QTPOC already existed. I was using that language in 2019 and it was written in, but I was able to go in and update, certain parts of the book. Not completely, because I'm still gonna do more corrections, but I was able to insert those new acronyms and just new identity markers. I was able to do that.
So.
Yeah.
I gotta give you key. Jasmin. It felt like a little party when you Belle, who was in the book, because many of us knew each other.
Exactly.
Like the post started happening, and it's like a little it really felt like a little party online. I was like, oh, you're in it too. Oh, congratulations. There's a lot of
things. I think one of the things I love too, and Ayanna, I mean, you're all making this point. It's not easy to translate the experience of being in a party online or being in a party like for real into a book. It's not easy. And what I love about it is first of all, it's beautiful. The images you have of all the people that you've interviewed in their homes, they kind of pop with vitality, color, with the way that, you can tell people know each other because of seeing these different works of art or different objects within their homes. And it's different from, say, like if you watch a film and it's a film that's from like 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and they're trying to do something where they're showing that people communicate, by sending emails or text messages, and you see this little, bubble that pops up in the screen. It looks so dated. This looks something that's fresh, like it will always have kind of like a fresh, open and appealing look to it, as opposed to something that says, okay, well, this was actually rooted in an experience that was very much a social experience.
I'm really glad that you picked up on that. The book came out in 2021. And obviously I did create the book, for 2021 conception, but yes and no. This book is also for 2040 and for 2050. We always look back, always, always, always. And I'm capturing I'm capturing many of these luminaries. Well, there are 2 veteran artists, but I'm capturing many of these luminaries in their prime under 40. And that was key. A lot of the subjects in my book are around my age, or like elder millennials born in the early 80s. So a lot of my peers, from my age group are being documented, but it was key to document a lot of folks in their prime, 45 and under. That was very, very key. We always look back. We've been looking back at the 90s for the past 7 years. So we will, in 2040, we will look back. And that was monumentally important.
And also, I just want to point out too, it seems to me that, in addition to documenting, interviewing, friending, knowing, interacting, networking with, people of color, right, who are in your book, there's also, it would seem, not, this necessarily concerted effort. It's like who to be able to also talk about, gender and sexuality, to talk about queer identities. It's just there. It's not like, oh, let me, get this shovel and dig a hole and make sure that this is a really heavy effort.
Right.
It's part of the network. It's part of who we are.
Exactly. That was a very natural flow. When I was envisioning this book, of course, it was going to be Black and brown individuals, but never 50 Black and brown cis hetero folks. Never, ever, ever. That spectrum was was going to absolutely be reflected and illustrated beautifully. And it wasn't just as queer folks. Of course, it would be trans and non-binary folks. But that flow and that diversity is organic. I tried not to make the book feel forced in any way. I also didn't focus on trauma. I didn't ask these very traumatic questions.
It's on joy.
It's joy. It's Black and brown joy all throughout. There's joy and talking about your favorite color. There's joy and saying how the internet and social media like skyrocketed your career. There's joy in talking about your favorite fictional character. So I focus on very universal, foundational, questions, and that richness is seen in the answers. Also, it's funny. I've been doing the rounds of press, and a lot of white art writers are interviewing me because they work at these very mainstream, large, media outlets. And one person from ArtNet, I won't say her name, she just said, well, obviously I know that it's all people of color. That's like the one connecting thread, but I look at it and I still learn about an artist's process or an artist's tool, tools or materials in their studio, the visuals, because, there are these beautiful photographs. I'm almost learning about the creative process and their inspiration and day-to-day creative survival. And so that was interesting.
And I think, but that's important to point out though, because it's like you applied a different kind of rigor, right? That still held space for learning, for growth. Like there are very few books that, I've been blessed to have an opportunity to be in where like I'm more focused on, what did Derek say? What did Naima say?
Yeah.
And trying to learn from people that I know that, through the process of conversation, hopefully share something intimate, share the gem, and that I think, I don't think you get commended enough for just like, it's hard to put together a book of 50 people, schedules is nuts, and
it was insane.
And create an environment where they trust you.
Yes.
And we're going to be open.
But also, what was it, Larry? You all said that you didn't each know that the other was going to be in the book.
Right.
So to kind of keep that, it's not secrecy, but to keep that to yourself, to let that joy be a surprise to everyone when it's published. So,
exactly.
So one of the things I just wanted to say, we're at about 10 minutes left. Can't believe all this time has already gone by. And there are a couple of questions that we have that I just wanted to share. And some of them are directed to individuals and others are for everyone. So I'm going to start with the first one. This is from Sammy Jacobs. How do you all deal with self-doubt and harsh self-criticism, especially in a world where the people don't look like you?
Social media can be incredibly toxic. It's like a space for inspiration and information, but it's also like, it can also be a toilet. I know that we compare each other. We're humans. It's human nature. So I know a lot of us, like, we get stuck into the smoking mirrors, the digital smoking mirrors, and these fabulous, amazing things that we see online. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a human. So yeah, so like I'll look at someone who's maybe younger and they're verified and they're writing for an outlet and I'm not, and it's like, well, again, I'm a human. I could admit these flaws and these insecurities, but no one knows you. No, you know yourself, like you know yourself, you know your inner parts, you know your intestines, not your physical intestines, like you know the parts that make you, and you just push through. It's just, you just push through. Maybe you take a break and you just watch an amazing film, or you hide from social media for a week or so and just dive into a novel, but you will find parts of yourself, you will find that strength, you will find that confidence, like, or a friend like DMs you or you get a text, but you just push through. You just push through. Like I'm 40. I do not believe everything I see online. I am not fooled by everyone's amazing fabulous life. Like I know that we were all insecure and cringing and dying and like behind the scenes, behind the digital scene. So
but I think, Jasmin, one of the ways that you highlighted from the very beginning, each of you, Ayanna, Larry too, is that one of the things that can uplift you and support you and help you see through any cloudy lens, any sense of self-doubt are the friends in the network that you've established, right? I mean, that's where, you know, whenever I have a question or I'm like, I'm unsure about something, it's that network that I think can help push us all through. There's a question here from Ming Washington for Ayanna. And the question is, I am curious about your philosophies and ideas regarding collecting performance art and the ethics around re-performance.
Okay, I do have thoughts on that. But let me first say, Ming, shout outs to you, because I saw you popped up in questions I was watching earlier when George Wells talked. You popped up then, so you're a G. You out here doing all of so, because I remember she asked something there that was good. I can't remember what it was now, but I was like, who's this Ming? I remember your name.
Ming is an art history major, curatorial studies minor in our program, also a published poet and performance artist as well. So,
okay.
I hope you don't mind me spilling the beans, Ming. But she's also
no, I was impressed. I remember the name because I remember thinking, wow, this person asked a really good question, and like, I think he even said, keep in touch with me.
Yeah,
in the talk. So yeah,
but before you jump in, Ayanna, that's another good tactic in terms of networking, you know, making yourself memorable.
Yes,
that's true. That's true.
Definitely.
Within reason.
Yeah, within reason, but it can work. It's true when you're just on point. Anyway, I'm about to get off topic and tell an open story. That's not the point. So, collecting performance. Okay, so I come from what I would consider like a very DIY scene in New York, where the whole point was like kind of to be anti-capitalist. I probably was the least anti-capitalist of the people I was hanging with. And I still was kind of like on a rejection of the object for a long time. Now, that said, I do want to eat. I think that when it comes to collecting performance, the best way to collect is by collecting ephemera and by collecting the imagery and the video of the performance. Most of us do have that now. I feel like it was a point where that really wasn't happening, but now I feel like I see it more solidly, where there'll be editions of prints that are sold that coincide with a performance that I did. And I see that as separate work, right? Like it's not the same as buying the performance. I know that like a few museums have bought performances, but I think that as far as collecting it, it's kind of doper and more accessible, because if you buy my performance, I'm going to charge a lot for it, right? Because now you own it. I'm going to charge a lot for it. I can't reperform it, or I have to negotiate with you about how I can reperform it. There's a lot to it that I lose by selling the performance forever while I'm still living and able to do it. But like this thing that's on my head now, it's been in a lot of performances. There'll be a time where this is worth thousands, because you'll look at it and know that's that thing. The original cat suit is already worth a lot of money. This is the #2 cat suit. Eventually that'll be worth a lot of money. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of know with performance, what part of the performance is kind of being used over and over again, like what's useful to that artist, what is like a key piece. And then you buy the ephemera based on that, in my opinion. As far as reenacting things, I think that's fine with permission. The funny thing about performance is technically a lot of the stuff you can't copyright. There's a lot in it that you can't, like I stop traffic all the time. Is that a copyright thing? Not really. But if someone else starts doing it, usually people in the community will ostracize you and it won't be pretty. But as far as recreating it, a lot of times people have asked me to recreate things and I say, yeah, great. Because I see the performance as a score. So if you're gonna recreate it, you're recreating my score. And that's okay. It's like I'm the choreographer and I've given my permission and now you can do my dance. That's fine. I hope that answered it. You can pop in the chat if like I'm not hitting like.
And can Ming be in touch with you? Can she DM you?
Yeah, I'm not really super private. I'll just put this in here.
Thank you. All right, so there's another question here, and I'm just noting the time. We've got 3 minutes, but maybe we might go over a little bit if that's okay. From Obed Obwoge. And the question is, what are some ways that we as a Black community can distance ourselves from the gatekeeping that is so prevalent in white spaces, particularly in the arts? In my experience, it often feels like some established Black artists are actively boxing out, up and coming coming Black artists, becoming Black art, and coming Black artists from opportunities. So boxing out up and coming Black artists from opportunities.
Working together, investing in each other. This has come up so many times throughout the virtual tour. Like, why do we want a seat at their table so badly for whatever crumbs are going to leave us when they never wanted sitting at the table in the first place? So just investing in each other, supporting each other, being in community with each other, building together, forming collectives, curating each other into our shows, exhibiting together, just us. It's us. We are enough. We are enough. We are enough.
Yeah, I mean,
we may not know it. We are. I mean, many of us know it.
Build your own table.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, that's what we did with Art Noir. Because like when I started, because I'm self-taught as a curator, you know, I spent a good chunk of the beginning of my career crashing parties, crashing events. I throw a suit on and look the part. And at some point I kind of realized that this is not interesting, one, and then two, most people don't know a darn thing, right? And so, you know, and this goes back to the first question about doubt. I think, you know, I've been blessed enough to have certain events that have happened in my life that remind me that this is not an infinite physical experience. And so if you're not doing what's going to nourish you, what's going to make you happy, what's going to challenge you, then you're wasting incredible opportunities, right? And so I think thinking about this is why I said look to your left and to your right in your virtual community and your physical, right? Because it's like, it's an unfortunate circumstance. I mean, I've seen it, like, it's even something that it's conversations I've had in Ghana where you have like veteran artists and this distance between like, you know, emerging to kind of like superstar artists. And there's a respect for the veteran artists, but the veteran artists don't respect the young artists, right? And so, you know, it kind of is what it is. I think you go where you are respected and wanted. I think, but sometimes, like, you know, there have been older artists who, you know, life has occurred to them. They might not have gotten the opportunities that they think they deserved, but I've forced my way into relationships with certain people, you know? So like my first public art project was with Stanley Whitney. And Stanley, when I first met, it took me maybe 2 years to get Stanley to say yes.
You know, he was my professor
at Temple.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
But like,
gift.
Super sweet cat.
Don't lie, Stanley ain't sweet. He's funny, but he not.
Yeah. So once he trusts you,
Love
then
Stanley,
it's all good.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's like, it's building your own table with people that you trust.
Yes.
Making sure that you're operating from a place of abundance and not scarcity.
Yes.
Because if you're operating from a space of abundance, you're not worried about what the next person is doing. You're applauding them. And that's something I had to realize when I would see, you know, curators on this list. You'd be like, they're not a dope curator. And I just realized that's the wrong way to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, because at the end of the day, there's not enough of us. Right. And so like, I had to program myself to be in a mind space of constantly cheerleading, you know, if I can open up opportunities for other people, do it. Like, it's not even a thought. So I think it's hard. Like, I can't say don't worry about like the mainstream, because I think that's dismissive of how things are structured. But I wouldn't be obsessed with it, because at the end of the day, Black people create culture.
Yep.
Right. And as long as what you do is hot, it's fire, people want to be part of it. It's always going to attract the eyes and ears of the mainstream. So, you know, that's my last point on this. It's like, and also just focus on the work. You know, that's something I learned from Derek Adams. He was like, you know, it's great to get the accolades, it's great to get the attention and be celebrated, but at the end of the day, it's about the work. And if the work ain't strong, it don't really matter.
That's true.
So we have one last question, just based on our time, and I figure since it's International Women's Day today, this is the question. from an anonymous attendee. Could you briefly share a Black female artist who has inspired you and why? Whose shoulders do you feel you stand on today?
I'm gonna say Elia Alba, who's Afro-Dominican American. Elia Alba is a phenomenal woman. I had never known, I'm first generation Dominican American, so, and she's like a veteran artist. Anyone that's her age that I know is usually an immigrant. They're not first generation born in New York City. I'm not gonna say the decade she was born in, but it's, I was so fascinated by her. Like I never, like she knew Basquiat, she knew Herring, she ran in those circles. She was like their peers, their age. I'm monumentally fascinated by her. She's a powerhouse. She's multidisciplinary. She has a book called The Supper Club. It's funny, many of the subjects in We Are Here are also in The Supper Club, which also speaks to that overall synchronicity. But she is a powerhouse. I'm just always in awe of her. Her work, she multiplies, like her practice multiplies. There's dolls from like the 90s, like these like beautiful doll sculptures. And then there are these stunning, beautiful photographs that show these Black and brown artists as like these very iconic figures. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Larry?
I have two. Magdalena Thomas.
Yes.
We were giving props to Magdalena earlier today.
Yes.
Yeah,
Goddess.
just the way, like, not even her practice, but just how she handles business.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just no BS. And she's one of the few people who, how do I phrase it? Her feedback and criticism always comes from a place of love, right? Because you think you fly, and then she'll say something to me, and I'll be like, "What?" You know. But I know it's not coming from a malicious place, but it's a place of like, you know, making sure that you're striving to be better, you know, in whatever capacity that looks like for you. And I think, you know, our friend, Dr. Deb Willis, the ultimate multitask. Like, I still don't know how Deb does it, but Deb still finds time to reply to an email, have a coffee. So I think like they're both women who get it done, super accomplished, super generous, right? They're not folks who are holding on to information. They want people to know and understand so they can thrive in their respective spaces. And so I'm forever inspired and grateful to them both.
Thank you. I second your choices. Those are great. All right, Ayanna, you've got the last word.
All right, I'm gonna go with Lorraine O'Grady.
Yes.
That's my mentor, my friend. I can't say enough.
Wow.
I'm gonna also shout out Sir Rodney Sir, who works closely with Lorraine, but in his own right is a very interesting person in our world and a womanist who goes around saying he's a womanist. And I think that there's not enough of that. Like, and for his age group, unheard of. Like, it's really hard to find someone like him who's actually really happy in the shadows, but like he quietly is archiving women in the arts. So important. Oh, and last, I gotta say Wanda Riamundi Ortiz.
Yes, yes.
Wanda is a powerhouse. If y'all don't know her work, look up Chuleta and see what comes up. And you will just
Making me hungry.
She was doing it before like Instagram and all of that. She is a beast, a beast.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to thank you all, Jasmin, Larry, Ayanna, for joining us this evening. Thank you for inspiring our students. And I think I'm going to have one last word, even though I know we're 7 minutes over. If you have one word or one sentence, one little piece of advice to share with our students, would you please share that? If you have one piece of advice you want to share.
Just start and figure it out, but just start.
All right.
Just start.
Just start.
Yep.
Operate from a place of abundance.
Yes.
I think I just put it in the chat, but I'll say it out loud. You should kind of act like you're rappers trying to come up.
Yeah. Yeah.
like imitate other scenes that Black people have flourished in, and kind of pull from those. I pull from fashion. I make my own PR. If you get a show at a museum or a gallery and you're like a small chip person, they don't know you yet, it's no shade to you, but their PR person is overwhelmed. So they probably have to promote the McAleen. They got to promote Stanley. They got to promote the other people before they get to you. Come with your own press packet, meaning you have the Instagram post already. And Jasmin did this for us, and I think that worked beautifully. I haven't actually complimented you for that. She gave us already formatted squares of information, different layouts, wording, hashtags. All I had to do was cut and paste.
Variety, yeah.
It was easy. It was so easy. So if you can get your PR to be easy for the people you work with, even if you're an artist curating other artists in shows, which is, by the way, what rappers do. They put on their own showcase and tell people to come. You have to borrow from other industries because we figured out the blueprint, but we don't apply it to art.
Right.
Exactly.
Today we had a workshop on podcasting. So, I mean, just as an example to kind of think about, how you can bring your own press, your own materials to the floor. So
yeah, and then one last point, leverage the tools that are available to you.
Yes.
So Instagram, at the beginning of COVID, I would just get on IG Live and just answer questions for artists.
We did it too for a minute. I remember seeing you there, Larry.
Yeah. Clubhouse. I love it. It's intimate. And you can reach a lot of people in a very kind of compressed space. Like we did one, I think it was all women of color, either dealers or gallery owners. And we had 700 people in the room, which I didn't even anticipate.
Right. No, class is on fire.
Yeah.
All right.
So use the tools available, particularly the younger generation who are digital natives.
Yes.
You understand it better than me. So
Definitely.
TikTok, whatever you need to do.
TikTok pasta. All right. It's the dinner hour. It might be even beyond the dinner hour for some of us. Thank you so much, Rachel Brown, Lauren Harris. Thank you to Jasmin Hernandez, Larry Ossei-Mensah, and Ayanna Evans. We really enjoyed the evening with you, and we really are excited about the new publication. We are here. We are so excited and look forward to its success and to many conversations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.